In our dark story today, a famous car dealership tycoon checks into a hotel room late one night, and is found dead the next day. He had been stabbed over 30 times, and his mouth gagged with a strange erotic object. With very few clues to go on, investigators have the task of piecing together this bizarre crime scene. And their biggest question becomes, was he a target of murder, or was this some twisted sexual fantasy gone wrong? Our story takes us to the state of Oklahoma. Larry, who went by the nickname, the Big Cat, built a car dealership empire that stretched over several towns. Larry always sported his rhinestone blazer and black cowboy hat, especially during his TV commercials. Larry also loved to party hard and live in the high life. But he was also a husband, family man, churchgoer, and a proud philanthropist. Larry had recently started a brand new venture selling his own custom line of jewelry. But this new venture was also monopolizing most of his time. One Sunday morning, a hotel housekeeper walked into room 214 and found a horrific sight. She saw a middle-aged man lying naked and lifeless across the bed. He had been stabbed over 30 times. But the most bizarre part was that his mouth had been gagged with some sort of erotic object that included straps wrapped around his head. When investigators arrived on the scene, they knew the man's identity immediately. Larry was a local TV celebrity and famous entrepreneur. As police began processing the scene, they noticed that there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Some investigators commented that it was the most gruesome scene they ever worked. Investigators began lifting fingerprints and processing the blood splatters. The only item found in the room was a single suitcase that contained a few pieces of the victim's clothes and catalogs for his jewelry business. No one in Larry's family or business could think of anyone that would have wanted to harm him. Like in all businesses, there are always unhappy customers, but no one stuck out as an enemy. And Larry's wife had no indication that he was having an extramarital affair. The only real lead came from the desk clerk, from the night before, who said that Larry had checked into the hotel with an Asian woman. She said that the two paid cash, and that the woman put the room under her name, Sierra. Detectives began questioning guests and workers to see what else they may uncover. Those efforts unfortunately hit a dead end, except for one witness who said that he remembered seeing Larry and the woman coming into the hotel from the rear parking lot. He said that two acted very normal as they passed each other. Investigators wanted to check the surveillance cameras at the hotel. The surveillance video, from above the desk, was not very clear. It did show Larry, and with what appeared to be a female with dark hair standing at the front desk. Unfortunately, as they reviewed the video, the faces and details were very hard to make out. However, they got lucky with the camera from the rear doors. That video showed a very clear picture of both Larry and the mysterious woman. One that could be used to identify the woman in question. As investigators continued reviewing the footage, they discovered that Larry and this woman made two trips from the back parking lot. The first time, they were both seen rolling a piece of luggage into the hotel, but on the second trip, Larry was the only one carrying anything. It looked like some sort of briefcase. And this made them wonder, what could possibly be in this second bag? At this point, investigators knew exactly when Larry arrived at the hotel, and they now had a clear picture of the woman. The only question was, who was this woman? The next day, as detectives went over the crime scene, they kept coming back to how Larry was found. That's when one of them decided to go with his gut instinct, and pay a visit to the local gentleman clubs in the area. He went door to door with the picture in hand. And soon enough, those efforts would pay off. At one of the local clubs, employees identified the woman in the picture as one of their co-workers. They told authorities that her real name was Hannah, but her stage name was Sierra. The same name that was provided to the hotel. They also provided a current home address. Detectives immediately tracked the woman down, and brought her in for questioning. Before we continue with our story, if you enjoy true crime, dark, strange and mysterious stories, you've come to the right place. We upload at least once a week. Please, like and subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notification, so you'll never miss new content. When she was confronted with all the information and surveillance video they had gathered, she admitted going to the hotel with Larry. However, when she left, she said he was alive and well. She went on to tell authorities a story about how she accompanied Larry to the hotel, but only to purchase jewelry and make a trade with him. She said that she had seen some jewelry advertised in a local magazine, and called the number to obtain information regarding prices. Larry answered the call, and the two talked. Hannah said that during that conversation, she asked Larry if she could make a deal to trade out part of the payment with sex, because she couldn't afford all the pieces she wanted. She claimed that Larry agreed to these terms. So, the plan was to go with Larry to the hotel, bring some provocative clothing and toys, pick out the jewelry she wanted, and then negotiate payment. But she claims that when she walked into the room with him, she suddenly had a change of heart and told Larry that she was just going to pass on the whole deal, and just leave. This infuriated Larry, and the two had an argument, but she eventually just left the room. When Hannah finished, detectives had no choice but allow her to leave, but they were not buying her story. To learn more about that night, they turned to the other surveillance cameras to trace Larry and Hannah's steps. They found the cameras that aligned with room 214, and began watching the footage. The first thing investigators saw was the two enter the room shortly after midnight. This seemed in line with the time they checked in at the front desk. And then 40 minutes later, they saw Hannah walk out into the hallway, while making a call. As they watched, she continued down the hallway and then walked into a room. After 20 minutes passed, she was still inside the room, and out of sight. Detectives discovered that she turned into the ice and refreshment room. Now, they wanted to review the footage from that room to see exactly what she was doing. To their surprise, Hannah did nothing more than continue talking on her cell phone, but it didn't take long until they would see something out of the ordinary. At some point a man comes into view and passes up the opening to the room while looking inside. Suddenly, he steps back into view, looks at Hannah and then makes some type of gesture to her. This stranger was carrying some sort of plastic bag, with a large object outlined inside. Investigators zoomed in on the object and determined that it very well could have been a large knife. When they switched back to the hallway cameras, they watched Hannah and this new stranger enter room 214. It wasn't until 2 hours later, Hannah and the stranger would leave the room, but without Larry. Hannah was rolling her suitcase and the stranger had Larry's briefcase and his bag. And after several long hours of review, no one entered the room again until the following morning. Authorities now had lots of questions that needed answers. The next morning, detectives brought Hannah back into the station, and laid out the whole collection of video evidence. Frame by frame, they showed her entering the room, leave the room, meet up with this stranger that she obviously knew, and then re-enter the room. And then finally, they showed how she and this stranger left without Larry. With a mountain of incriminating evidence, Hannah had no choice but to come clean with detectives. She admitted that the mystery man was indeed her boyfriend. Next, she retold her story in a much different fashion. She said that she came across an advertisement for Larry's custom jewelry in a magazine. This led to the two of them hatching a plan to rob Larry. Hannah would place a call and inquire about purchasing some jewelry, and then entice Larry to accept an offer trading out sex for part of the payment. 2 nights later, Larry picked up Hannah after she got off of her shift at the club. The two checked into the hotel where she would pick out the pieces of jewelry she wanted, and then perform her duties throughout the rest of the night as a trade-out. Once they were in the room, everything was in motion. Hannah picked out the pieces she wanted and then started getting ready for their rendezvous. Hannah's boyfriend began texting her and she used that to make up a story that her roommate needed to come by to pick up a spare key that she was holding. She asked Larry to get undressed and get into bed while she ran down into the lobby. Instead, she went out the door and called her boyfriend who was waiting in the parking lot. He then came upstairs, met up with her, and the two went back into the room. Larry was now a hopeless sitting target, and her boyfriend began stabbing him to death. They staged the scene to look like a deranged sexual encounter and made off with his jewelry. The only problem with the couple's plan, they never once realized that surveillance cameras were silent witnesses watching every step of their evil plan. Hannah and her boyfriend stood trial and were both convicted and sentenced to life prison terms. It took the hard work of detectives and the help of several cameras, but justice was eventually served in the end.